But after a while, I was thinking, this isn't going to work. There's no way to reform this party because it's basically the uniparty. The uniparty is real and they don't want to be reformed. And honestly, I don't even think among the base there's the will to really reform this party and hold people accountable. I was never going to be that type who just said, I'm just going to say whatever the audience wants to hear just so I can get the clout, clicks, and cash. That's why they'll run cover for the police, unless it affects somebody who's wearing a MAGA hat. If George Floyd had been wearing a MAGA hat when he was murdered, I think it would be a lot different.
Hello and welcome to another edition of The Last Review. This is your host, Sergey Fenswick, not my real name, and in this episode we have a special edition as we cover and interview one of the best reporters and writers in the new media today, Jeff Charles. What does he think about the Liberty movement? Did he break our rating scale with a high score? Let's find out. Freelance writer, Substack publisher, podcaster, and one of the most prolific voices on Twitter/X, Jeff Charles is almost impossible to categorize, which has enabled his reach and message to expand greatly over the last decade. While popular conservative radio host Sonny Johnson may refer to Jeff as her Carlton, a reference to Fresh Prince, he has broad appeal and has become one of the more relatable reporters out there with both incredible ability and versatility. He can inform or do guest spots with anyone, from the raw and brilliant Hotep Jesus to the supremely polished Rising by the Hill, to the even more sanitized and restrictive television media like Fox and Newsmax. His proficient ability extends to columns with Newsweek, Red State, etc. It also extends to his own podcast, A Fresh Perspective, and his own Substack, Chasing Liberty. So how did the massive portfolio of work of Jeff Charles score or rate when taken through the analysis matrix? Let's see. For the accuracy category, Jeff scores a 23 out of 25. Jeff goes through a great deal of research for all of his stories. He brings the receipts, with anything from corrupt local government affairs to police brutality to gun rights. While he does interject his opinion in some of his stories, he does not misrepresent facts to strengthen that opinion. The only thing keeping him from a perfect score in this category is the more conservative lens of his work. He does not run cover or make excuses for any conservative person or policy, but he does cover the matters that matter to conservatives without much input from the political left. For authenticity, Jeff earns a 24 out of 25. He does not provide spin. While he is in the Liberty movement, Jeff is an independent voice. He's been critical of the libertarian and conservative figures on a consistent basis when it is warranted. It is his consistency that is one of his biggest assets. Readers and viewers know that if he is emphatically concerned about one act of police brutality, then he will be the same way for another, no matter what race or class the perpetrator or victim is. He's willing to speak on dangerous truths, be it on protecting and expanding gun rights, local police running amok, or the war on drugs. In the originality category, yes, Jeff broke the scale. He and his work earned 25 out of 25. Originality refers to whether or not someone is adding something new to the conversation or providing a unique take. Jeff always does this. His courageous and nuanced takes on race, justice, and liberty will open anyone's eyes. He provides a red pill for race relations. It was his view on Candace Owens that Candace often relied on authoritarian perspectives on the police and might even go to convulsions if she had to say one pro-black opinion that really did provide a fresh perspective on the enormous blind spot of race on the political right. His recent article on Vivek Ramaswamy threaded yet another needle. Vivek had been highly critical of black Americans and single-parent households, which is a bit of a tired talking point considering the divorce numbers for both black and white families are starting to converge. Jeff took a unique tack in approaching Vivek, however. He questioned why Vivek uses these talking points as part of his platform without introducing one solution or item that might boost black families. There were no whataboutisms, no cheap shots, no red herrings. Jeff came up with a pro-black, pro-liberty perspective that lifts everyone up. When it came to making sense of complex race relations, there's no one better than Jeff Charles. He can hold up a mirror to the U.S. and come up with accessible, inoffensive ways to build bridges across racial and class divides. For the Intrigue category, Jeff scores a 22 out of 25. His Twitter/X game is unparalleled. When the Senate passed a vote to do away with the dress code, Jeff came up with a series of AI masterworks of art in his posts that caught the attention of Rand Paul and millions of others. Shout out to Rand Paul sporting a bathrobe on the steps of the nation's capital. Jeff's humor permeates his social media feeds and editorials. Nothing is out of bounds when it comes to his critiques. Keeping him from a perfect score, though, in this category is the need to find more ways to bring his brilliant humor and engaging entertainment to more of his podcasts or Substack. Overall, Jeff Charles earns a 94 out of 100 from the Analysis Matrix, which gives him the highest score to date on Sergey Fenwick's The Last Review. This is no surprise. It's reporters like Jeff that inspired this review series and publication to begin with here. This series looks at who you can and can't trust, and whether he's opening your eyes or making you smile. Jeff is one of the most refreshingly honest and authentic reporters in the business. Simply put, he's an awesome pundit. And now we go to an exclusive interview with Jeff Charles. I'm here with Jeff Charles, who is the host of A Fresh Perspective podcast. He is a contributor for Red State, Newsweek Opinion, and also has a Substack called Chasing Liberty. Jeff is also a freelance writer and political contributor who has appeared on Fox News, The Hills Rising, Fox Soul, Newsmax, and First TV Network. And again, he's one of the most authentic and honest voices out there. Thank you for being with me today, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm glad to be with you.
All right. First, I'd like to know if could you describe your journey to both the Liberty movement as well as to writing and broadcasting? Was it always a case of being talented at writing, or was there some type of person, moment, or movement that inspired you? Or maybe it's somewhere in between.
Wow, that's a good question. I'll try to give you a short answer on that. But, I've been into politics really since I was in my early 20s. I really started paying a lot of attention after 9/11. That's what really got me to focus on what's going on in the world. And it's interesting because I started focusing a lot on foreign policy. Now, I wasn't doing any commentary, but I just wanted to pay attention because, we got attacked on 9/11 and I wanted to understand why. And that kind of led me to paying attention to more domestic politics and things like that, especially when we started getting into these wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And, I didn't really have much of a political identity back then. I was kind of Democrat by default. I am from Southern California, so that kind of explains it. And back then, it was cool to hate George W. Bush. That's what people did in California, which, I can understand why, especially now. But,
yeah.
I was never, I don't think I would have ever considered myself a leftist. I didn't really even know what the words liberal and conservative meant back then, at least not to the extent that I do now. Then later on, I started being exposed to more voices on the conservative side. I had a job where I would drive a lot, so I listened to a lot of talk radio, and I realized that as far as philosophically and ideologically, I lined up more with them than I did with the left, although I can't say that I really agreed with everything that people on the right said either. Right. Fast forward, I got into commentary around 2017. I started doing some writing. It started out really as a way to make some money on the side. I was always pretty good at writing, but then around 2014, I realized that I could make money writing as a kind of a side hustle. Sure. So I would do a lot of content marketing type of stuff, copywriting, ghost blogging, that kind of thing. And then, but I was still very much interested in the world of politics, and I figured, it'd be nice if I could make money writing about something that I'm really passionate about. And I had an opportunity, and I started doing it around 2017. And then about a year or so later, I got involved with Red State, which it's probably the primary platform.
I totally derailed your train of thought.
No, you're fine. I still know where I am. And so, I started writing with Red State. And, that's kind of when things started leading to another. And I ended up quitting my day job to do this full time. I started my podcast and other platforms, started writing for Newsweek Opinion. I started doing a lot of appearances on other networks and things like that. But I was still mainly in the conservative camp. I never really referred to myself as a Republican. But over the years, my beliefs had started changing, probably around 2017. I'd say that's probably the start of it, where I started to kind of understand the ideas of liberty more. And the more I understood what true liberty is when I started realizing how little the Republican Party, and to a large extent, the conservative movement, doesn't really live up to that. I was introduced to more libertarian ideas, and this was kind of like a slow burn at first. But as I started understanding what the proper role of government should be, my beliefs ended up lining up more with libertarians. Now, over that time, I noticed in the conservative movement, there was more of a libertarian influence in certain areas, obviously not everywhere, but in certain areas, like, for instance, there was a lot of conservatives who were okay with the idea of legalizing marijuana, and things like that. So, even when I realized that I was probably more of a libertarian than a conservative, I still stayed in the conservative camp, because in the liberty movement, there is that debate between, do we take over the Republican Party because at least based on their platform, they're closer to us than Democrats, or do we focus on building the liberty movement outside of that? I was more in the camp of, let's see if we can take over the Republican Party. Even then I knew it was a long shot, but I figured it was the best shot that we had. And so I would use my platform.
You just saw an outsider like Trump almost in theory take over, but then it was probably around, maybe you saw some of that when he was elected, but then he let in a bunch of career politicians in his cabinet, and you thought all those things about, I guess he did echo some things about liberty, I'd say, but then
he showed that
the policies were the same in the end.
Exactly, but he did show that it could be done as an outsider, basically disrupting the establishment and things like that. So that kind of lended more credibility to that idea. But you're right, he ended up doing a lot of the same things that his predecessors did. He brought in a lot of the same people, and you saw how the establishment pushed back against him. And I think, at least with the MAGA movement, they made the mistake of thinking that they had won over the establishment. They hadn't. The establishment was still in control. Things were a lot harder for them after Trump, but at the same time, all they had to do was wait it out. And we kind of saw what happened in the midterm elections, even in 2020. They worked against them as fully as they could. And after the midterms, I had already been on this journey where I'm like, I don't know if I want to stay over here. And I had always been watching the Libertarian Party and the liberty movement from the outside. I still had a lot of libertarian followers, and I still interacted with libertarians, and I saw how the Mises Caucus took over the Libertarian Party. And I'd always said, even way before that, if the Libertarian Party actually starts getting it together to where they can be taken seriously, if they at least started taking themselves seriously, then I might jump ship. And so that all culminated in the 2022 midterms. After November, I went to the ballot box, and I was fully expecting to vote for mostly Republicans. Even though I had voted Libertarian in the past at the local level, and I just couldn't do it. I was expecting to vote for Greg Abbott. Up to the point that I got up to the ballot box, I was expecting to vote for Greg Abbott.
No kidding.
And I think in my mind, I kind of put all of my frustrations with the Republican Party on him. And I said, he hasn't earned my vote, but you know what? None of the rest of the Republicans have either.
Sure.
They don't really care what I think. The Republicans want to do what they want to do. They run on this libertarian platform. They get into office and they govern like diet Democrats. And conservatives complain about that all the time, right? And so I ended up voting for Mark Tippett for Texas governor, who was a libertarian candidate. And I voted mostly libertarian. And to me, it was like, I've been using my platform to try to reform this party. And a lot of other people have too, and they're still doing it. So it's not just me. But after a while, I was thinking, this isn't going to work. There's no way to reform this party because it's basically the uniparty. The uniparty is real. And they don't want to be reformed. And honestly, I don't even think among the base there's the will to really reform this party and hold people accountable. I saw that when Ronna McDaniel was still elected as the head of the RNC. How Kevin McCarthy still got his position. Mitch McConnell stayed in his. So I'm like, okay, these people aren't really serious enough to affect real change. They're more concerned about, memes and owning the libs. And I'm not talking about everybody, but I mean, that does describe enough of the base to where it's not to where they can't really affect the change that they want with or without Trump. So
it's more about winning than change, I'd say. Yeah.
Exactly. And the problem is that they don't realize that even when you get Republicans elected, you're still not winning. That's what a lot of them haven't figured out yet. And so from that point, and that was around November, I started thinking I need to pivot. And so I did. My girlfriend, Donnie, and I started doing Twitter spaces. We called them Liberty Spaces. Got a really good reaction with that. And she went through the same thing that I did, just like a lot of other people have. And we were getting a very good response from that. People in the Libertarian Party and the movement started reaching out to us and started looking at ways to get us involved, which, by the way, it was always very kind of tricky and difficult to get involved with the local Republican Party in a meaningful way. And it was just a seamless process. And I saw how the Mises Caucus wanted to take a very local focus, which is something that I had been preaching for years to conservatives. Local politics is your most important area, and I wanted to do more grassroots work. And when I saw how Mises Caucus was launching Project Decentralized Revolution, which is focusing primarily on getting the right candidates in at the local level, I was like, okay, I'm in. This is what I've been wanting to do, and it's opened up a lot of opportunities so far. And that's kind of what led me to where I am right now. So I said I was going to make that short, but I guess I lied.
That's all right. You may have answered another future question of mine or two along the way, so we're good. We're good. You mentioned Donnie, who I just want to say, for the record, is another phenomenal voice in the space. Big fan of hers. You both, I would say, incorporate a fair amount of humor in the things that you do, and it's for me, it makes it more relatable, and I appreciate it. In your articles in particular, you're not afraid to really go for it on the humor end of things, or at the very least, like a clever line that's like, really cutting deep. So I want to talk to you a little bit about your style, your writing style. How did it evolve? Did it take long to get this gutsy, or do you have some type of mindset or philosophy about like incorporating humor? Because like I said, it's really impressive the way you are able to incorporate humor and just that wit and cleverness into your articles.
Thank you. So, I've always had a sense of humor since I was a child. My family has a very weird, kind of sick sense of humor, and I inherited that from my grandfather all the way down to my mom, uncles, aunts. And so, especially when you are immersed in the political world, if you don't have a sense of humor, you're probably going to go nuts. You're going to end up inside of a padded room. You're going to be trying to knock on that door because it's dirty. And especially nowadays with all the vitriol and the toxicity, especially with the hyper-partisanship, you have to have a sense of humor. And to me, over time, when I started writing, I already would inject humor into a lot of what I would write, a lot of sarcasm. And then I grew into where I was using more satirical stuff to make a point. And when I saw the reaction to that, I really devoted my time to studying satire, studying comedy, how to deliver certain points in a humorous way. And in a way that might even offend some people. And sometimes I do like to slap people upside the head to get their attention and to hear what I'm trying to say. I don't like to be abrasive, but I do like to make a point. So I grew to this point. And I guess for me, the advantage was that like even when I was in the conservative movement area, I was never in love with the Republican Party. Like I said, I didn't really even identify as Republican because even then I realized that both parties are trash. And I think most people realize that. Even if they support one, they're really not supporting the party. They're just voting against the other one that they don't like. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to me, I was never going to be that type who just said, you know, I'm just going to say whatever the audience wants to hear just so I can get the clout, clicks, and cash. Mm-hmm. I could do that very easily, but I wouldn't be able to look at myself in the mirror. I'd rather tell people the truth as I see it and build an audience that really wants to hear that wants to hear the nuance, that wants to think outside of the left and right paradigm. And so to me, I had no problem attacking the Republican Party and even the conservative movement when I felt like they were doing things that were counterproductive to what they said their goals were. I mean, sure. A lot of it dealt with, you know, reaching out to racial minorities, Black people and Mexican and Hispanic voters. And to me, it's just like just seeing a lot of the stupid rhetoric that they would use. I was like, yeah, no, someone needs to call this out, especially at the time when the prominent Black conservatives were feeding these narratives to their base that they knew that they wanted to hear, but that weren't really true. Mm-hmm. I became one of the Black conservatives who was very instrumental in fighting back against that. So yeah, I can't just go along to get along. If I see something wrong, I have to say something. I don't always do it. Sometimes I do hold back, or I try to say it in a more diplomatic way, but sure. I'm not going to just run interference for somebody just because they have a certain letter against their name. I've done the same thing even with people in the liberty movement. If I disagree with them, I'm going to say it. So to me, you need to have people like that in every movement. Otherwise, it's just going to be a huge echo chamber, more like a cult, where people just go along with what their influencers say, which sadly, that really is the state of things, whether you're a Democrat or Republican.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, what you do with your humor too, I think it pushes boundaries but that's a good thing. You're expanding your mind. And I would push back a little bit on what you're saying in terms of like, I can't remember how you just phrased it, but maybe slapping people upside the head or with your. I don't think it does that. I think the humor appeals to just about everybody. And then again, I'm not in your DMs, so I don't know what people are saying to you. But I will say this: it's the humor that you incorporate is funny enough to speak to the 25-year-old who's way too online, people of whiteness, bears, all that. Okay. But it's also like the analogies that you use that are sometimes humorous and just sometimes flat out insightful. They are logical and foolproof enough to speak to the 75-year-old boomer. Like I've been able to use a lot of what you say to like some of my older relatives, and it just.
Oh, really?
And they were really closed-minded about some things, and then it just opens their mind because, again, you're able to kind of thread that needle with both humor and, like I said, some of the comparisons and analogies you make that I think it's just effective.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I try to be, and I guess. For some people, they might feel like I'm slapping them across the head, but for others, they don't. They get what I'm saying.
I think it's disarming. Like it's almost like a release for some people when they hear the humor or see it in a different light. That's it's almost akin to like a stand-up comedian who's saying something, but in a very funny way, and then you get it. You get it in a very non-jarring, like a non, I guess, abrasive way.
Yeah, that's what I try to do. I mean, and there are times where I do try to be abrasive, but most of the time I don't. But I think a lot of it is in pointing out the inconsistencies that people have in their belief systems that they don't realize that they have. And we've all done this, right? We've all been inconsistent at one point or another. But a lot of it is pointing out, areas where they might condemn behavior in that somebody engages in on the other side that they would excuse if somebody on their side did it. And a lot of times I'm just pointing that stuff out, or I point out the inconsistencies between the values that they claim to espouse and what they actually do in real life. So I think, and I do it to the left and the right, because when you're hyper partisan, there's it is impossible to avoid being inconsistent. You're going to be inconsistent if you're hyperpartisan, because you only care about something when it benefits your side politically. And a lot of people don't even realize they're doing it. So sometimes it can be jarring to have somebody point it out, especially if they're on your side.
Right. That kind of leads me to my next topic. And I have a couple questions just regarding journalism and new media in this day and age. And I hope you have enough time here. Because it probably might be another 10 minutes.
Yeah,
okay. Today's new media, it thrives on just admitting their bias up front. As a lot of the YouTubers and podcasters, they almost wear it like a badge of honor. That, hey, I'm authentic. I'm being honest about who I am, and then they're trying to report honestly thereafter. This whole thing of just incorporating or just admitting bias, do you think it's a good thing, or is it leaving people like too vulnerable to reach the point where the bias takes over the whole point of journalism and authenticity? Like, instead of, we're not just getting biased reporters, we're starting to put out biased stories because, hey, I said who I am, right? So I guess, what's your take on journalists and hosts being honest about their bias?
So media, the world of media and the press is in a very interesting place right now. People are no longer turning to just cable news or to their local newspapers or to the Washington Post, New York Times. Those are still there, and I don't think they're going away anytime soon. But especially with the younger generations, most people are going online to get their news. A lot of them are going to different television shows. There was a time where younger people, most of them said that they got their news from Jon Stewart on The Daily Show. Right. And so now you have digital media or alternative media, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of different ways to present ideas and to present information. It's not just on TV and through the newspaper, through the news sites, YouTube, podcasts, all of these different avenues. And the thing is, going to touching on what you said about being open with the bias. The thing is, the press has always been biased. It always has. At some points they may have hidden it better, or maybe they at least try to kind of pull their bias back. But in any news report, there's going to be some bias because we're all human, and it's impossible to keep it completely out. The problem arose when the media started being even more biased, but continued to lie about it. They would say, "Oh, we're telling you the facts as it is. We report, you decide, fair and balanced." Those are lies. No, you are biased. So, on one level, I can appreciate the fact that more people are willing to say, yes, I'm a journalist, but I'm coming from this perspective. Because when people are honest about it, then when if I see, oh, this guy is on the left, okay, let's see what he has to think from a leftist perspective. Let's see what this guy thinks from a libertarian perspective or from a national conservative perspective or what have you. I think that's a good thing. Yeah. But the pitfall, though, is that we like to consume content that affirms what we already think. That's the danger there. Now, that was already going on because, like I said, it's always been biased, but now it's more pronounced, right? Sure. So if you go to, like, say, a conservative news site, you're going to get a conservative point of view, which means that if you're talking about a certain story, like, say, there's like a controversial story, if you're only getting one side of the story, you're not getting all of it, which means you're not really informed. You're in an echo chamber. What I tell my audience is, if you really want to understand a story, read both sides. Read people from the left, read people from the right, because I guarantee you both sides are leaving stuff out that they don't want you to know. And I always say the media lies all the time. Not everybody. I'm a member of the media. There's a lot of honest people in the media, but even the honest people will be deceptive. Not in making things up. Usually they don't make up facts. That does happen, but usually that's not the main way they lie to you. The main way they lie to you is by leaving stuff out, leaving facts out that they don't want you to know that will contradict your narrative. But guess who's going to give you those facts? People on the other side who are leaving out what the first person left out. So you have to read both sides to really understand an issue. So that's where I see media going. But unfortunately, I think most people haven't realized that yet. So now we basically, like Scott Adams talks about two different screens in the movie theater.
Sure.
We're all watching the same thing on two different screens, and neither of us are getting the full story, which is contributing to the division, which is actually what the elites and the ruling class who are in charge of these media apparatuses want.
There you go. Yeah. I still have concerns that now that we're uplifting this facade, we're doing away with the facade of I'm unbiased, but like I'm afraid we might be approaching like more instances of like just unprofessionalism in like the YouTube space, the Twitter space, and things like that, just because you say, hey, I'm being upfront, I'm being honest, I'm telling it like it is, but at the same time, like what there might be some benefit to being a little bit more diplomatic, or like I said about your writing, I don't think you run cover or run spin for anybody. But I do see it, some people playing favorites in the YouTube space and the podcast world. So I don't know. It worries me a little bit, but I guess, compared to, old legacy media, mainstream media, they got their own, set of deceptions going on too. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different pitfalls to navigate. I mean, even if you look at cable news before alternative media came around, I mean, if you looked at your average cable news program and they had different guests on, different talking heads, were you really learning anything? No, it was impossible, because they get like 5-second sound bites. They don't have in-depth conversations. And I've been on Fox News, I've been on a lot of these things, and I know that when I go in, I'm only going to have like total maybe 45 seconds to a minute, including different people interjecting and things like that to actually get my point out. So you're not really going to learn anything. But I hear your concerns, and you're right to be concerned about it, especially because these people have a level of credibility that is not deserved. Now, it's no different than CNN and the others. They don't deserve all their credibility either, but they have it because they're an established news organization. But if you have somebody on YouTube who has a lot of followers, they automatically have credibility because they have a lot of followers. But you can get a lot of followers just by telling people what they want to hear all the time. So that's why I tell people, don't just blindly believe what your influencers are telling you. Some of them are lying to you. Some of them don't know they're lying to you, and they're just repeating what they've been hearing. But they're not really there to inform you. They're there to get your clout, clicks, and cash, and to influence you. I mean, it's in the name.
Right. The other big, I guess, dilemma in journalism that I'm seeing, it's a lot on the right or center right, and I even wrote it out, so I'm just going to read it, and you let me know what you think, okay? Sure. So, like, there are many conservative and libertarian reporters who they aren't afraid at all to speak out against injustices and authoritarian overreach. But the moment an injustice occurs between authority figures and a black person, or should I say a black victim, these reporters, they just short circuit. I mean, we've seen people unnecessarily murdered on camera. Yet these supposed open-minded, think for themselves, small government supporting reporters, and I really want to name names, but I'm not going to. They're quick to scramble to dig into the person's criminal history and all that, like, and somehow justify police and government injustice. So they're competing in mental gymnastics just to justify the authority figures' heinous actions. So it hurts to see what I would normally call good writers, some of them racial minorities themselves, do this. Why do you think they give cover to authoritarianism in these instances? And then I got to follow up after that.
There are a lot of reasons, but realistically, you use the word authoritarians. This is what I'm going to say is going to sound like whataboutism, but it really isn't. Okay. You saw how the left treated Ashley Babbitt when she was murdered by a police officer, right?
Right.
Yeah. They were hashtag back the blue then, weren't they? Now, here's the thing. Mm-hmm. None of these people actually care about criminal justice or limited government. They might think they do. They might say they do. But right and left like big government. They just like different parts of the government being big and others being small. Like Republicans want lower taxes, lower regulations, but they want big government when it comes to law enforcement. That's why they'll run cover for the police, unless it affects somebody who's wearing a MAGA hat. If George Floyd had been wearing a MAGA hat when he was murdered, I think it would be a lot different. People are not consistent, whether they're on the right or the left. And that's what I was talking about earlier. People don't want talking about pointing out inconsistencies in the values that they say they espouse versus how they actually act when that's put to the test. To me, I can condemn Ashley Babbitt's murder. I can condemn George Floyd's murder. I can condemn Daniel Shaver's murder, Ryan Whitaker, Tony Timpa, all three white people who were murdered by police who got away with it. And I can condemn the same thing with Walter Scott, Eric Garner. To me, the race and political affiliation doesn't matter. The enemy is the government and the tyrants in the government and the ruling class running that government. So that's what I said when you said these authoritarians, because both sides are authoritarian. Both sides would tell you that they're not, but they both are. It's just, I think the right is more hypocritical about it, right? Because they say, I want to shrink the government. I want to address government corruption. But then when they are presented with an example of it, they will support it. The left is more honest. They say, no, we want more government. They may say they don't like government corruption, but they'll say the government is full of white supremacists. Let's give them more money. Let's make them more stronger. Oh, yeah, there's systemic racism. So let's strengthen the entity that's doing systemic racism. But at least they'll tell you they want to grow the government. Republicans will tell you the opposite while still advocating for growing it. So to me, and I think a lot of this is tribalism. I think a lot of it's kind of a complex issue because I think another factor is the tribalism element. So if a guy gets shot by the police, a black guy, they see what the left does, where they try to say, oh, well, every day black men are being murdered by police and they're not armed and they're not presenting a threat. And then they have to go way to the opposite side instead of being the adults in the room and saying, you know what? There might be some racism in the police. There might not be. This is wrong. And that
I don't understand why they take that as a loss or something,
Well, yeah, because you're right. they do see it as a loss. I mean, even with George Floyd, to me, I understand, how the left did all that hubbub over him and they had the golden cask and all that stuff. Yeah, that was way overboard. But to me, if you're more upset about George Floyd having ingested drugs and having this whole celebration than you are about the fact that an agent of the state wearing a gun and a badge murdered him, and you are an authoritarian. I mean, you are not limited government. I mean, because you can be mad at both, but to me, I see that I'm like, yeah, I see how the left is exploiting this. This is wrong, but a man's dead because of the government. I'm more angry at that. I'm sorry. That's my priority.
Yeah. I wish we could just admit an injustice has occurred, then wait a beat, then wait another beat, before going, but what about,
Yeah, it's like the Jacksonville shooting. The first reaction was, well, we have his manifesto. Where's the Nashville shooter's manifesto? And I'm like, oh my God, is that a good question? Yeah, I want to know that too. But that wasn't my first response. My first response was, this is horrible. 3 people lost their lives because some racist went into a Dollar General and shot him up because he had some racism issues. He was a piece of crap. And to me, it's like, that was the first thing I thought. Like the Nashville stuff didn't really come until later, but it's like, it goes back to, I mean, Donnie and I talk about this a lot. People have lost their humanity. So when they see something bad happen to somebody and the government's done it, they're not thinking about what happened. They're thinking about the political ramifications. Right. So, I mean, it's like Ashley Babbitt. Well, I almost wrote a satire, and I probably still will at some point write a satire about how something bad happens, and then we check the political affiliation first before we form our opinion on it. I mean,
dig into their voter registration card. All right, here we go.
Yeah, exactly.
I just, would you have any like, I don't know, advice or prescription, like what we can do to stop or just speak out against the journalistic practice of smearing Black victims of violence? Because like I said, like I see some people who are normally good reporters, but like as soon as the races change or they think they represent something else, they're going to dig into their history. So is there anything that we can do, like audience wise or other writers, to stop that kind of, or just kind of prevent that journalistic practice that we see so often?
This is tough. And hopefully I don't filibuster for too long. There was a situation that came up in the Liberty movement with the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire.
Yes, I'm familiar.
Yeah, you're familiar. Okay. So, just for those who don't know, the Twitter account for the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, and I am delineating between the people who run the Twitter account and the actual members of the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. They tweeted out some racially insensitive stuff. They told Nina Turner, who was a Black woman, that she should pick cotton for free because she's basically a socialist, yada, yada, yada. They did a bunch of other stuff and this has been an ongoing problem. And behind the scenes, people in the Liberty movement were taking issue with it because they know how bad it makes them look, right? And so the thing is, I told them, and I spoke out because, I mean, you know me, I'm going to say something publicly, and a bunch of us did. Maj Touré did, Donnie did. And to me, I told libertarians the same thing I would tell conservatives when I was more in that movement. The issue is not whether people are saying stupid or racist or insensitive or incendiary things. The issue is how you respond to it, right? So I was actually happy to see that the Liberty movement responded in the way that conservatives usually don't. They had a bunch of spaces. We even had these guys on debating them, saying, "Yeah, you're hurting our mission. This isn't right." Yada yada yada. You had a bunch of libertarians coming out against it. If that happens on the conservative side, you don't have a lot of people really voicing their disagreement, even though I know they do disagree. So to me, the way, the saying goes, the way to fight bad speech is with good speech. So when you see these people saying these things and they're wrong, say something. Now, you don't have to get on a high pedestal and virtue signal and pound your chest and say, I categorically disavow, blah, 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 blah. No, just say, I rock with that. I mean, if somebody on the left says something you don't like, you'll say it. So do the same to your side. So I think that that's the important part. And also understanding that you got to start thinking critically. And we all like to say we think critically, but we don't. And I'm guilty of it too. A lot of us have knee-jerk emotional reactions to things, right? Yeah. But stop and think, well, maybe is what they're saying really true? Is that really reflective of what's going on? The statistics that they use about Black people or about anybody else, are they actually true or are they cherry picking? Is there more to the story? It's going to take a lot of curiosity and a willingness to feel some cognitive dissonance. And honestly, I think cognitive dissonance is a big part of the problem about why people just go along with what they're being told, because we all try to avoid feeling cognitive dissonance. I mean, science has said that cognitive dissonance can even cause physical discomfort.
It's painful.
So it can be. And to me, people have to learn how to lessen that quote unquote pain. The way I do it is by not being married to all of my opinions. I'm married to my principles, but not to all of my opinions. I'm willing to be wrong about something. So I don't feel it as badly if I see something that contradicts what I say. But I think really getting past that, and I know I'm kind of all over the place, but the idea is that just because somebody with a big following says something doesn't mean it's automatically true. Question everybody, including myself, because I can be wrong. I won't lie to you, but I don't get everything right. If your favorite influencer is saying something and other people are saying something else, do a little digging. We all have computers in our pockets. There's no excuse. You don't have to spend hours and hours a day researching stuff. You can look up the different angles to different issues. Start thinking outside of that. I mean, on the right, we like to say we're free thinkers. Well, okay, then actually be a free thinker. Think outside of what everybody's telling you. I'm not sure if that answered your question. I hope it did.
No, there's some good nuggets of advice in there for sure. How much time do you have left? I have a couple questions, but I don't know how much time you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Let's see. So you both onto the liberty movement in general here. You cover it and you participate in it. How do you see this movement evolving over the next year or two?
Good question. So we are in an election season. And I think the liberty movement is still going through somewhat of a evolution, which is good because it was long overdue. I think if the Mises Caucus gets its way, it's going to be a lot of local focus, which is music to my ears. That warms my heart. I want to see more liberty-minded people getting elected as mayor, city council, sheriff, county judge, what have you. I mean, if they want to elect a libertarian for dog catcher, I'm good with that too. But to me, I think we focus so much on national politics, and I'm not saying that we should ignore it, but we don't have much of a chance of winning at that level. Now we should be making sure that we're running good people at the national level so we can continue to get the message out and to continue to educate the public on how corrupt and evil the Democratic and Republican parties are. But we need to take a long-term focus. This isn't going to happen overnight. We need more of the right people in local offices who are willing to push back against government overreach coming from the federal and state level. I see the evolution reflecting a party that does want to be taken seriously, that does want to win more people over, that does want to even expand their horizons to other types of Americans, Black, Hispanic, rural, urban, whatever you want to call it. So I know that they want to recruit a lot of people to run, a lot of people to manage campaigns. And if that faction of the party continues winning out, then I think that we're going to see some positive things coming up. Also, along with that, I think I'm seeing also more of a focus on local activism as well. It's something Donnie and I talk about all the time, and we've been really trying to drive this in the movement. Maj Touré is too. People like Chase Oliver, Spike Cohen with his organization, You Are the Power. I mean, these people are pushing back against local government aggression and tyranny, and they're doing it publicly. I mean, you see people like Chase and Spike showing up at city council meetings, speaking out against what the government is doing. You see people speaking out against eminent domain and other issues. I want to see more of that, and I think that we are. And I think that we need to do that and continue highlighting that on social media so that people can see these are the people who are going to show up to fight for your rights, whether if you're being abused by your local government.
Mm-hmm. I think I really appreciate what you've done with the local stories. You've been covering. You've had a focus on local issues for a long time, whether you were putting out positive articles about, different things around the country. But you've always had that kind of, I don't know, an appreciation for the local story. And I've in turn appreciated that. I just wonder if it's almost like a paradox, like, you need a strong grassroots foundation to really get it going, but nothing gets more people more involved than a high profile leader at the same time. So, I mean, what do you think is the path towards growth for the liberty movement? Like, how does it achieve more and more?
So I think it's a lot of what I just said, but to touch on your point, you do need a figurehead, but I would say you need figureheads. I don't think the liberty movement needs a Donald Trump. I don't think it needs an RFK Jr. type of figure. I might get in trouble for saying this. I don't think we need a Ron Paul. Maybe we need multiple Ron Pauls. Sure. I think we need to stop thinking there has to be this one guy who's going to lead the movement forward. There might be one who's more prominent than others just because they get more popular. That's fine as long as they're pushing the liberty cause. But we need multiple people to come up and be leaders for different types of people. I mean, because different types of people are attracted to different types of things. So I think that having a lot of people come up as leaders and us working together to promote them, to all promote each other in the movement, I think that will be more influential than, say, having somebody make a huge splash when they run for president. Again, not knocking that. They should do that. But we're going to need a lot more of that. I mean, the Libertarian Party is the third largest party in the nation, but the second the second most popular is leaps and bounds ahead of us. So I think in order to start making a difference, to get people more aware of what the Libertarian Party stands for and the liberty movement as overall, is to start getting more involved and to start making sure that it's getting visibility. That's the good thing about alternative media. You know, CNN and MSNBC and to a large extent Fox News is not going to highlight libertarian voices, but we don't really need them to. It'd be great if they did, but we don't really need them to. We've got alternative media. We've got big names. I mean, Joe Rogan. I would rather go on Joe Rogan than go on Fox News. I mean, I think I'd be able to reach more people that way. So we do have an opportunity. We just need to take it. We need to cut out a lot of this infighting. The debate having internal debates is great, but a lot of the unnecessary infighting needs to stop so that we can work together to move this thing forward.
I guess one last thing. Who do you think are the major political libertarian players that you see or should be rising to the top? I mean, you mentioned Spike, Maj, Dave Smith, Larry Sharp is another guy I know who's always been near the top. Who should we keep an eye on? And I mean, do you have a bet on who's the presidential candidate?
I actually have an idea of who it's going to be. I probably shouldn't say so here, but
okay. I want to know, but no, by all means.
Yeah, I mean, and it's even that's not guaranteed, but I mean, I think it's going to happen. I would say honestly, people like Chase Oliver are people to watch. Derek Bros in Houston, Texas, he's doing a lot of good work out there. I would say, I mean, I know we already mentioned Spike and Larry and Maj, but I mean, Maj is getting even more active and he's getting even more out there. I would say to keep a close eye on what Spike's doing with his local work. I mean, he's known for being the vice presidential candidate in 2020, but I'd rather see him more known for doing what he is right now. And I can't put words in his mouth, but I suspect that he might agree with that. But yeah, I would say people like them are definitely ones to watch coming up. And I honestly think that we're going to see more coming out of the woodwork.
Okay. All right. Very good. You've given me more than enough time. So I'm deeply appreciative of this. And, just like usual, you open my eyes to new things. So I thank you for your time, for your ideas. And, I wish you nothing but the best in the future. Is there anything else you want to add or anything? Yeah.
I guess I would just say, I mean, if you're not already involved in your local politics, in your local community, fix that right now. Because we talk about government corruption all the time. If you're listening to this, I guarantee you it's happening right in your backyard and you probably don't even know about it because we don't tend to focus on it. So start getting plugged in. You don't have to, make it your full-time job, but at least get an idea of what your mayors, your city councils are doing, your sheriffs, your police, your local police departments. Start getting plugged in. And I think, if you start attending city council meetings, things like that, you're going to see some stuff that you don't like. And hopefully that sparks you to want to start affecting some change right where you live.
Thank you for watching or listening. Please like and subscribe and share this video with as many people as you want. Post in the comments if there are any shows you want to see reviewed. I also have a developing website and social media accounts. You can subscribe to those too. Thank you for that.